Sell your watch, Dad. We need cash. Those were the first words out of my daughter's mouth when she walked through my door that Friday afternoon. No hello, no hug, no, happy to see you, Dad. Just those 5 words, sharp and demanding, slicing through the quiet of my home like a blade. I looked up from the worn leather armchair where I'd been sitting, newspaper in my lap, coffee cooling at my side. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Maybe stress had twisted her tone. Maybe she meant something else. But then her eyes locked onto my wrist, narrowed with the hunger of desperation, and I knew she meant exactly what she said. The watch. It wasn't just any watch. It had belonged to my father before me, a gold Omega he bought with his first real paycheck after returning from the war. He wore it every day of his life until the day he handed it to me, saying, "Take care of this, Will. It'll remind you that time is earned, not given." I'd worn it to my first job interview, my wedding, and on the day my daughter was born. That watch carried more history than any bank account could measure, and now she wanted me to sell it. "Dad," Samantha pressed, her voice rising as if impatience could bend me to her will. "It's just sitting there on your wrist. You don't need it. We need money. Right now." Behind her, Peter, my son-in-law, leaned casually against the doorway, like he owned the place, arms folded, lips curled into that smirk I'd grown to despise. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. His silence was a performance in itself, radiating the same unspoken message he always carried. You're the old man with resources. Pay up. I set my newspaper down slowly, buying myself a second to breathe. My joints ached as I shifted in the chair. The kind of ache that comes from decades of labor, of double shifts and missed dinners, of carrying the weight of a family on your back. "This watch isn't for sale, Samantha," I said, calm but firm. "It never was, and it never will be." Her hands flew up in exasperation, her manicured nails catching the light. "Oh my God, Dad, are you serious? We're drowning here, and you're clinging to some stupid piece of jewelry? Do you even care what we're going through?" Stupid piece of jewelry. The word stung more than I expected, not because of the insult, but because it revealed just how far my daughter had drifted from understanding me, or her own roots. That watch wasn't a trinket. It was sacrifice forged in metal, memory embedded in gears. It was my father's heartbeat ticking on my wrist. Peter finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "Come on, Will. You're sitting on a treasure chest while we're out here scraping by. Don't you think it's time to share the wealth? What's a watch compared to your family's needs?" Family's needs. He made it sound noble, but I knew better. Last month it had been emergency rent. Before that, gambling debts. The month before, a business investment that somehow evaporated overnight. There was always a crisis, always a hand outstretched, always the same expectation. Dad will fix it. Dad will pay. Dad will sacrifice. But as I looked at them, my daughter with her designer handbag slung over her shoulder, Peter in his brand new sneakers, I saw no sacrifice. I saw entitlement dressed up as suffering, and I felt something shift inside me. "Samantha," I said quietly, "I worked 43 years for everything in this house. 43 years of 12-hour shifts, of coming home when you were already asleep. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I gave up more than you'll ever know so you could grow up comfortable, so you'd never feel the cold edge of hunger or debt. And you stand there and ask me to pawn my father's watch as if it means nothing?" Her eyes darted away, but only for a second. Then they hardened, sharp as glass. "You're selfish. You've always been selfish. You hoard your money, your things, while your own daughter suffers." Selfish. That word cut deep because it was the exact opposite of who I had been all my life. Every dollar I earned, I'd funneled back into this family. The house she grew up in, the college education she threw away, the car I bought her for her 16th birthday, all of it came from sacrifice. From me. Your suffering, I said, my voice colder now, is self-inflicted. Every debt, every so-called emergency, they're the consequences of choices you made, not me. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Even Jessica, my wife, her mother, stood in the kitchen doorway, dish towel twisted between her hands, too afraid to step in. She had always been the peacemaker, the bridge between me and Samantha. But now, even she seemed to sense this was different. This was no ordinary argument. This was a breaking point. Peter's smirk faltered, just slightly. Samantha's lips trembled before curling back into a sneer. Then, without another word, she stepped forward, yanked the watch off my wrist with surprising force, and held it up like a trophy. "If you won't do the right thing, I will," she spat. And before I could stop her, she turned on her heel, stormed out the front door, and disappeared into the afternoon sun. The slam of the door echoed through the house. I sat there frozen, wrist bare, the skin still indented where the watch had been. Jessica whispered my name, but it felt distant, like a sound carried on the wind. In that moment, I realized she hadn't just stolen a watch. She'd stolen the last illusion that I still had a daughter who respected me. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. For a few seconds, silence pressed down on the house like a weight. I stared at the empty space where Samantha had stood, my bare wrist tingling, where the watch had been. The indentation it left on my skin looked like a wound, not from metal, but from betrayal. Jessica stepped forward finally, her face pale. "William," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly would shatter what little peace remained. She didn't mean it. But I knew she did. Samantha meant every word, every demand, every insult. Peter lingered behind her, his bulk filling the doorway. He hadn't left with Samantha. That alone should have warned me. His smirk was gone now, replaced with something uglier, something that looked far too comfortable in my living room. "You know, Will," he said, lowering himself onto the leather sofa like he owned it. "She's right. You're holding on to things that could help your family. Isn't that what you worked for all these years? To take care of your daughter?" I rose slowly from the chair, my knees groaning, but my voice was steady. I worked to give her a life, not to bankroll every bad decision she makes as an adult. Peter leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his tone dropping into something darker. "Maybe you should rethink that. A watch like that? We could clear some debts, pay off rent. It's just sitting there while we suffer." Suffer. The word echoed hollow, almost laughable. My eyes swept over him. The fresh sneakers, the expensive jacket. Behind the mask of desperation was indulgence, not struggle. "You don't suffer, Peter," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "You gamble. You waste. And then you come here and expect me to fix it. That's not suffering. That's laziness." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He didn't need to. His silence was an agreement wrapped in resentment. Jessica wrung the towel in her hands, her voice breaking. "Please, both of you, calm down. We can work this out reasonably." Reasonably. That word set Samantha off earlier, and I could hear her voice echo in my mind. "He's sitting on hundreds of thousands while we're drowning in debt." I turned to Jessica. "She's not drowning. She's spending. Every dollar I've given her has gone to handbags, vacations, nonsense. And when it's gone, she comes back for more." The family photo on the mantel caught my eye. Samantha as a 5-year-old sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, her gap-toothed smile wide and innocent. That photo had tilted forward during the chaos, the silver frame catching the lamplight like a mocking wink. When had that child, the one who used to draw stick-figure families and leave me crayon notes, turned into this stranger who ripped heirlooms from my wrist and called me selfish? Peter shifted closer, lowering his voice. You're not getting any younger, old man. Wouldn't you rather share your wealth now, while you're alive, to see it appreciated? Old man. The phrase landed heavier than the insult itself. Bitter. Disrespectful. This was the man my daughter had married. The man who whispered poison into her ear and helped transform need into entitlement. I straightened my back, despite the ache in my joints. I worked 43 years for my retirement, for dignity. Not so you could sit here and lecture me about generosity while living off my daughter's credit cards. Peter's smirk returned, thinner this time. Careful, Will. Family doesn't abandon family. The warning clung to the air, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking. William, please, don't make this worse. I shook my head, every word coming from a place I hadn't touched in years. Not anger, but resolve. No, Jess, this isn't worse. This is the truth. And then, as if summoned by my words, the sharp roar of Samantha's car engine tore through the evening air. Tires squealed across the driveway, rubber burning against asphalt. She was gone. Peter lingered just long enough to make me uneasy. He stood finally, looming over me. This isn't over, Will. Think about what you're risking. You'll regret choosing pride over family. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Both of you, don't come back until you're ready to talk with respect. Peter hesitated, eyes glittering with something between contempt and calculation. Then he stepped past me, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. He didn't slam the door. He didn't need to. His words as he crossed the threshold were worse than any slam. You'll regret this, old man. When you're sick and need someone to care for you, remember this moment. The door clicked shut behind him. For the first time in decades, my house was empty of my daughter's chaos. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was heavy, suffocating. I stood gripping the brass handle, my hand trembling. Through the frosted glass, I saw their car reverse aggressively out of the driveway, tires spinning. The sound faded down the street until only the quiet remained. Jessica's soft footsteps approached behind me. William. I turned slowly. The living room looked like a battlefield. Coffee stains on the rug. Inheritance documents scattered across the floor. The family photo still tilted forward. A home built on sacrifice, now shaken to its core. My wife's eyes searched mine for reassurance. But all I could whisper was the truth that sat like a stone in my chest. 43 years, I said, and this is my reward. The house was quiet that night, but not the kind of quiet I'd prayed for. It wasn't peace. It was absence. Jessica moved through the kitchen with slow, deliberate motions, washing the dishes as if scrubbing hard enough could erase what had just happened. Every few seconds she glanced toward me, her lips pressing into a line, her eyes full of questions she couldn't bring herself to ask. I sat at the dining table staring at my bare wrist. My arm felt naked, incomplete. That watch had been with me longer than my marriage, longer than my career, longer than Samantha had been alive. Its weight had been a comfort, a reminder that my father's strength ticked along with mine. And now it was gone, torn away by the very person I once held in my arms and swore I'd protect. Jessica finally broke the silence. William, what if she tries to sell it? I didn't answer right away. A part of me couldn't fathom it, that she'd march into some pawn shop and strip my father's legacy down to a handful of bills. But the harsher part of me knew better. Samantha's desperation had long since bulldozed over sentiment. She will, I said at last, my voice flat. And she won't think twice about it. Jessica sank into the chair across from me, her dish towel twisted tight in her hands. But it's insured, isn't it? Didn't you register it years ago? I blinked, remembering the paperwork I'd filed when my father passed. The watch had been appraised, logged, even photographed for insurance. Not just because of its value, but because it was classified as a heritage heirloom, an antique with historical significance. For the first time that evening, I felt something shift inside me. The heaviness in my chest loosened just enough to let a thought through. If she tries to pawn it, it won't be as simple as handing it over the counter. Jessica must have seen the flicker of realization in my eyes. William? I shook my head slowly. If she tries, there may already be consequences waiting for her. The next morning broke with pale sunlight stretching across our street. I sat on the porch with my coffee, the newspaper unopened on my lap. My eyes weren't on the print. They were on the quiet road, on the thought of where Samantha had gone with my father's watch. I imagined her storming into a pawn shop, Peter by her side, eyes bright with the greed of quick cash. She'd set it on the counter like a trophy, fully expecting the world to bend to her will the way I always had. But this wasn't my house. This wasn't a living room where guilt and manipulation had power. This was a legal system, records, numbers, verification. And sure enough, while Jessica and I sat in that uneasy stillness, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mr. Carr? A man's voice, firm, professional. This is Detective Harris with the City Police Department. Do you own a gold Omega watch, early 1950s model, serial number ending in 246? The coffee in my mug trembled as my grip faltered. Yes, I said, my voice barely steady. Why do you ask? There was a pause, the kind that makes your skin prickle. It was brought into a pawn shop this morning. The shop owner flagged it immediately. The item is registered as an insured heirloom, in your name. Are you aware of who might have been in possession of it? The words punched the air out of my lungs. Jessica, hovering nearby, covered her mouth with her hands. My daughter's face flashed before me. Her cold eyes, her sneer, her fingers ripping it off my wrist. I think I do, I whispered. The detective continued. Standard procedure requires us to detain the individuals who attempted to pawn it. They claimed it belonged to them, but the records tell a different story. Would you like to file an official report of theft? My throat went dry. A part of me wanted to shout yes, to let the law finally do what decades of my leniency had failed to accomplish. But another part, the father part, recoiled at the thought of pressing charges against my own child. Jessica touched my shoulder gently, her eyes wide. She'd heard everything. Mr. Carr, the detective pressed. I closed my eyes. I need some time. Please, just hold on to the watch. We'll keep it secure, he assured. But understand, sir, if this happens again, the consequences could be serious. Whoever brought it in is walking a thin line. The call ended. My phone felt heavier than the watch ever had. Jessica sank into the chair beside me, tears threatening her eyes. She tried to sell it, she whispered. She really did. I nodded, unable to form words. Somewhere across town, my daughter had stood under the bright fluorescent lights of a pawn shop, expecting easy money. Instead, she'd been met with officers and paperwork, her scheme unraveling before her eyes. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end. If anything, it was just the beginning. By evening, the storm arrived. Not outside. The sky was calm, golden with sunset, but inside my house, where the silence of the morning shattered beneath the screech of tires in my driveway. Jessica looked up from the sink, her hands frozen on the dinner plates. "She's here," she whispered. I didn't need her warning. I could hear it, the angry slam of 2-car doors, the stomping footsteps up the walkway, the doorbell pressed hard and fast like a weapon. Then came the pounding, fists against wood, demanding, unrelenting. "Dad!" Samantha's voice screeched through the door. "Open this right now!" I stood slowly, my joints stiff but my mind clear. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the usual dread that came before these confrontations. Something inside me had shifted since that phone call with the detective. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man pushed past the limits of enabling. Jessica reached for my arm. "William, don't." But I did. I opened the door. There she stood, face red, hair disheveled, eyes blazing with a fury that no longer even tried to disguise itself as hurt. Behind her, Peter loomed, his posture coiled like a snake ready to strike. "What the hell did you do?" Samantha spat, storming past me before I could answer. She marched into the living room, her purse swinging violently against her hip. "Did you call the cops on me? Did you?" Jessica followed her inside, voice trembling. Samantha, stop yelling." "Don't you start with me, Mom," Samantha snapped, whirling on her. "You think this is funny? I walk into a pawn shop, try to get a little help, and suddenly I've got police asking me about serial numbers and insurance forms. That's not normal. That's sabotage." I closed the door behind Peter, who entered slower. His dark eyes locked on me like a predator assessing prey. "I didn't sabotage anything," I said evenly, stepping into the living room. "That watch is mine. It's registered. Of course the police flagged it. That's how the law works." Samantha laughed, not out of humor, but bitterness. "The law? Oh, so now you care about the law. But when your daughter's drowning, you just sit back and watch her sink?" "You're not drowning," I said coldly. "You're diving headfirst into debt and expecting me to pull you out every time. There's a difference." Her lip trembled. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut her off. "You ripped my father's watch off my wrist and tried to sell it behind my back. That's theft, Samantha. Plain and simple." She froze at the word. Theft. Peter stepped forward then, his voice low, menacing. "Careful what you call it, old man. You start throwing around words like theft, and things get ugly real fast." I met his stare without flinching. "They already are ugly." Jessica's voice wavered from behind me. "Please, can we just talk calmly?" But Samantha wasn't listening. She jabbed a finger at me, her nails painted red like claws. "You set me up. You knew what would happen. You wanted me humiliated." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "I didn't set you up. You walked into that pawn shop on your own. You humiliated yourself." Her cheeks flushed deep crimson. "You're sick. Do you get off on this? Watching your daughter beg? Watching me suffer?" The words sliced deep, but I didn't let them show. Instead, I straightened, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. "No, Samantha. What makes me sick is watching my daughter throw away every sacrifice I ever made, then blame me when her life falls apart." The room went still. Even Peter seemed caught off guard by the steel in my voice. Then Samantha's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Fine. If you won't help me, you'll never see your grandchildren again. Emma, Jake, they won't even remember your name by the time I'm done." The threat landed heavy, the same way it always had. In the past, that line would have gutted me, bent me, made me reach for my checkbook just to keep the children in my life. But not this time. I looked her dead in the eye. "That's not a threat anymore, Samantha. That's a blessing." Her face went slack, stunned. For the first time, she didn't have a script, didn't have a ready-made line to throw back. Peter broke the silence with a bitter chuckle. "You think you're tough, huh? You think cutting us off makes you powerful?" He stepped closer, his bulk towering over me. "We know where you live, old man. We know your routines. You might want to think twice before pushing us too far." Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my tone as calm as still water. Peter smirked. "Just reminding you, family works both ways. You cut us off, don't expect us to just disappear quietly." I nodded slowly. "Good. Because if you don't disappear quietly, the next call I make won't be to a detective about a watch. It'll be to the police about harassment, and this time I won't hesitate." Samantha's eyes darted between me and Peter, her confidence faltering. She tugged at his arm. "Let's go." He lingered for one more second, his stare burning into mine, before turning on his heel. Samantha followed, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. The door slammed again, but this time it didn't rattle the windows. This time it felt final. Jessica collapsed into the sofa, tears spilling freely now. "William, what have we become?" I sank down beside her, my hand trembling as it found hers. "No," I said softly. "What they've become." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The pawn shop had been just a spark. The fire was still coming. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence didn't suffocate. It settled. Heavy, yes, like dust after an explosion, but also strangely clarifying. Jessica and I sat side by side on the couch, our hands entwined. Her tears had dried, though her shoulders still trembled from the storm that had passed through our living room. For minutes neither of us spoke. The tick of the wall clock filled the air where words didn't dare go. Finally, Jessica whispered, "William, I don't even recognize her anymore." My eyes drifted to the family photo on the mantel, the one of 5-year-old Samantha on my shoulders at the county fair. Her smile, gap-toothed and innocent, so bright it had once lit up my darkest days. I swallowed hard. Neither do I. My gaze shifted lower, to the inheritance documents scattered on the coffee table, papers I'd once held like promises. Now they looked like shackles, evidence of years spent planning for a future my daughter no longer deserved. "I gave her everything," I murmured, my voice more to myself than to Jessica. "Double shifts to pay for her textbooks. Sold my car so she could have ballet lessons. Worked weekends so she could have that dollhouse she wanted one Christmas. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every dollar funneled into her future." "And she sold it all," Jessica finished softly. I nodded. "Piece by piece, until tonight, when she tried to pawn the last of me." Jessica flinched, her hand tightening on mine. "Don't say that." But it was true. That watch wasn't just metal, it was time. My father's time. My time. My life measured in seconds and years, given freely to a child who now used it as currency. For decades, I had confused enabling with love. I thought covering her debts, bailing her out, making excuses, was protecting her. But all it had done was teach her that consequences were optional. That family was a bottomless well to be drained at will. Not anymore. I stood suddenly, energy surging through my tired bones, and walked toward my office. Jessica followed with her eyes, but didn't rise, as if she knew this was a step I had to take alone. Inside, the familiar scent of old paper and polished wood steadied me. The desk lamp glowed softly over stacks of bills and files. On the top corner of my desk lay a leather portfolio, 3 decades of receipts, transfers, and canceled checks. Proof of every time I had saved Samantha from herself. I opened it, flipping through page after page. The car I sold to pay her gambling debts. The wire transfer labeled emergency rent. The credit card statement with her designer purchases. 30 years of sacrifice, disguised as generosity, recorded in black and white. My chest tightened, but not from grief, from clarity. I powered on the computer, the hum filling the room like a drum roll. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Jessica's voice floated faintly from the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Taking back control." One by one, I began the process. The credit card account, the one she used as if it were her own. Because years ago, in a moment of weakness, I had added her as an authorized user. That ended now. Remove authorized user. A prompt appeared. Confirm? I clicked yes. The monthly transfers, automatic payments into her checking account, gone. Her car insurance, which I'd been covering under the guise of helping her stay safe. Canceled. A gym membership I'd been tricked into paying for, supposedly for her mental health. Terminated. Each cancellation felt like a release. A stone lifted from my back. My hands didn't tremble. My chest didn't ache. For the first time in years, I was calm. Behind me, Jessica stepped into the room. She rested a hand on my shoulder, her thumb brushing gently against my collar. "William, are you sure?" I turned to look at her, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes. "Jess, we've spent decades teaching her that love equals money. That family means bailout. If we don't stop now, she'll destroy us both, and herself." Jessica's lips trembled, but she nodded. "Then stop." I faced the screen again. One last button. Save changes. I clicked. The system confirmed. All updates processed, effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair. For a moment, I just listened to the quiet hum of the computer, the soft rustle of papers on my desk, Jessica's steady breathing behind me. For the first time in decades, I felt something I hadn't when it came to Samantha. Control. Not reactive, desperate control. Not scrambling to patch another hole in the sinking ship of her life. But steady, purposeful authority. The kind of control a father should have. Tomorrow morning, Samantha would try to swipe that card, and it would decline. She'd wait for her automatic transfers, and they wouldn't arrive. She'd call the insurance company, and they'd tell her coverage was gone. And she would know, not because I told her, but because reality itself would. Jessica leaned down and kissed the top of my head, her lips trembling against my hair. "She'll call," she whispered. "I know. And what will you say?" I closed the portfolio, the pages heavy with the ghosts of 30 years. "I'll say the word I should have said a long time ago." I looked her straight in the eye. "No." The next morning dawned brighter than it had any right to. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, catching on Jessica's little herb garden lying neatly on the sill. Rosemary, basil, mint. She tended them every morning like they were her children, nurturing, patient, forgiving. I sat at the table with my coffee, the newspaper folded beside me. But my eyes weren't on the print. They were on the phone resting silently in the center of the table. I didn't have to wonder if it would ring. I knew it would. The only question was when. At 8:15, it did. Samantha's name lit up the screen, her smiling face staring back at me from a photo taken years ago at Emma's birthday party. Back when things were simpler. Back when she still looked at me with something like love instead of resentment. I let it ring twice before answering. "Good morning, Samantha." Her voice was already frantic. "Dad, what the hell did you do? My card's not working. I tried to get groceries and it was declined. The car insurance payment bounced. What is happening?" I took a calm sip of my coffee before answering. "I made some changes, that's all." Her words tumbled out fast, shrill, panicked. "Changes? You can't just cut me off like that without warning. I have bills, responsibilities. You don't understand." "Responsibilities," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "Like the responsibility to treat your parents with respect? The responsibility to manage your own finances instead of bleeding ours dry? Those responsibilities? There was silence on the other end for a beat. Then came the shift. The panic morphed into something harsher, defensive, angry. "You're punishing me, aren't you? For the pawn shop. You set me up." The words slammed into the quiet. Kitchen. Jessica froze mid-step, her eyes locking with mine. "Not what pawn shop? Not what are you talking about?" Just straight into accusation. A confession without meaning to confess. I leaned back in my chair, letting her words hang there, giving them time to condemn her all by themselves. "I didn't set you up," I said finally. "The world doesn't need my help to catch you, Samantha. You've done that all by yourself." Her voice dropped into that familiar pitch, the one that had worked on me so many times before, dripping with victimhood. "Dad, please, you don't get it. Peter and we're struggling. We just needed a little help. It was just one little thing." "One little thing?" My voice hardened. "You ripped my father's watch off my wrist and tried to pawn it for cash. That wasn't a little thing, Samantha. That was theft. That was betrayal." Her breathing quickened on the line. "It was a prank. That's all it was. You're blowing this out of proportion." A prank. She had the audacity to call it that. "A prank doesn't involve the police," I said quietly. For a moment, the only sound was her ragged breathing. Then, her voice snapped cold. "This isn't over, old man. You think cutting me off makes you strong? You'll regret this." The line went dead. Jessica slowly sat down across from me, her face pale, but her eyes full of something new. Admiration. "What did you say to her?" I sipped my coffee again. "The truth." And for the first time in decades, I realized how freeing it was to stop apologizing for it. By afternoon, the storm came back. Tires screeched across the driveway, louder this time. Slammed car doors shook the air. Jessica's hand gripped my arm. "She's back." The doorbell rang once, then again, then fists against wood, hard and unrelenting. "Dad!" Samantha's voice ripped through the door. "Open up now." I rose slowly, every motion deliberate, every step heavier with the weight of resolve. I opened the door. There she was again, hair wild, face blotched with anger, eyes blazing. Behind her, Peter loomed like a shadow, his sneer sharp, his presence thick with menace. She shoved past me without waiting for permission. "What's wrong with you?" she shrieked. "You think you can just cut me off? Leave me with nothing? You're insane!" Jessica stood in the kitchen doorway, her face tight with fear. I shut the door behind Peter, who swaggered in, his smirk wide. "You've made a mistake, Will," he said. "A big one." Samantha spun toward me, her hands shaking. "Do you know what you've done? My children will go hungry. We'll be homeless. You're destroying your own family." Her words were knives designed to cut, to guilt, to force my hand back onto the wallet. But I didn't bleed this time. "You destroyed this family long before I cut off the money," I said, my tone low, controlled. Her jaw dropped, but before she could spit venom back, I continued. "You used your children as bargaining chips. You sent threats instead of apologies. You turned my father's watch into cash for your debts. And you want to lecture me about family?" Peter stepped forward, his voice dropping into a growl. "You think you're safe behind your little bank account? You think cutting us off makes you untouchable? We know where you live. We know your routines." Jessica gasped. I met his stare without flinching. "Then you also know what happens if you cross me again. Because this time, I won't just cut you off. I'll make one phone call, and you'll both be dealing with the law, not me." Samantha's face twisted in fury. "You'll never see your grandchildren again." I stepped closer, close enough for her to see the steel in my eyes. "That's not a threat anymore, Samantha. That's a blessing. Because I refuse to let them grow up thinking manipulation is love. She froze. For the first time in years, my daughter had no words. Peter tugged at her arm, his own mask of confidence cracking. Come on, he's not worth it. But as they stormed out, I called after them. My voice was steady, cold, final. You wanted me to sell my watch. Instead, you sold the last of my patience, and it's gone forever. The door closed behind them. Jessica collapsed into my arms, trembling, whispering, William, I've never seen you like that. I held her close, my own heart steady. That's because I've never been free like this. Night fell heavy that day, but for once my chest didn't ache with dread. Jessica and I sat at the kitchen table, dinner plates cleared, chamomile tea steaming between us. The quiet wasn't suffocating now. It was deliberate, chosen. I looked at her across the table, her eyes red but steady. Jess, I said, my voice firm, this has to stop. Once and for all. She knew what I meant. She didn't ask. Stop what? She simply nodded, her thumb tracing the rim of her teacup. What are you going to do? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as if the years themselves were carved into it. For 30 years, I've been her safety net. Every fall she took, I caught her. And instead of learning, she jumped higher, risked more, because she knew she'd never hit the ground. But tonight she finally hit it. And I'm not cushioning the blow anymore. Jessica's lips trembled, but she whispered, Then show her. So I did. I rose from the table and walked to my office, Jessica following quietly, almost reverently. The glow of the desk lamp lit the room in a warm pool of light. I opened the leather portfolio, my ledger of sacrifice, and set it on the desk like evidence in a trial. Piece by piece, I began dismantling the web that kept her tethered to me. The credit card access? Already revoked. The automatic transfers? Gone. But there was more. My bank accounts, once open highways for her emergencies, were now fortified walls. I changed every password, every PIN. Numbers only Jessica and I would know, tied not to Samantha's whims, but to our own life together. I opened the retirement accounts, scrolling through balances that had taken me 4 decades to build, all earmarked for a peaceful life with Jessica, all under threat if I didn't lock them down. Not anymore, I muttered. With a few clicks, I restructured the accounts, adding extra verification steps that no one, not even Samantha, could manipulate. Jessica stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder. William, she said softly, this isn't just money. This is drawing a line. I looked up at her, my voice steady. Exactly. She crossed lines I never thought possible. Now I'm building ones she can't get through. I turned next to the folder marked estate planning. For years, I told myself it was too soon to think about changing it. That with time, Samantha might grow, learn, mature. But tonight, staring at the evidence of her betrayal, I knew the truth. Leaving her anything would be handing a loaded weapon to someone who'd already tried to use it against me. No more, I whispered. I pulled out the documents and laid them across the desk. Jessica sat beside me, her hand shaking slightly as she helped me smooth the pages. Are you really going to— Yes, I interrupted gently. Tomorrow, first thing. Margaret Summers will know what to do. She'll help me protect what matters. Jessica's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. Together, we sat in the dim glow of the office, the paperwork spread before us like a map of choices. I had spent decades building a future for my daughter. Tonight, I began building one that protected us from her. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Because revenge wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was paperwork. And this time, the consequences would be permanent. Morning sunlight slanted through the blinds as I sat across from Margaret Summers, the lawyer who had handled our family's affairs for 15 years. Her office smelled faintly of old books and coffee, the shelves lined with leather-bound volumes that whispered of order, rules, and justice. She adjusted her glasses, pen poised above her yellow legal pad. "William," she said gently, "when you called, you said this was urgent. Tell me what's been happening." I told her everything. The fight over the inheritance, the watch, the pawn shop, the police, the threats about the grandchildren, the confrontation in my own living room. Every word spilled out like stones I'd been carrying for decades. Jessica sat beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, the room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. "This isn't just family conflict, William," she said finally. "This is harassment, intimidation, and it's escalating." I nodded, my jaw tight. "That's why I'm here. I need protection. Legal, financial, permanent." She tapped her pen against the pad. "Then we start with your will." She pulled a clean sheet from her file and began outlining options. "You want to ensure your assets bypass your daughter, correct?" "Yes," I said firmly. "And instead?" "For my grandchildren," I said. "For Emma and Jake. I won't punish them for their mother's sins, but I won't let her touch a single cent." Margaret nodded. "Then we'll set up an educational trust. Independent trustees will manage it. Funds can only be released for documented expenses, school, college, legitimate educational needs. Samantha and Peter will have no access." Jessica exhaled, her shoulders dropping with relief. "What about our home?" I asked. "Fully protected under joint ownership," Margaret assured. "Samantha can't touch it." I leaned forward, my voice lower now. "And if she tries again? If she shows up at my door, threatening, demanding?" Margaret's eyes sharpened. "We file for a restraining order. Between the theft attempt, the pawn shop incident, and her threats, you have more than enough grounds. If she violates it, it becomes a criminal matter." Jessica's hand found mine, her grip firm. Margaret continued, her pen scratching across the page. "William, this is more than cutting her off financially. This is reclaiming your life. Once this is filed, she'll have no leverage left, no inheritance to fight over, no access to your accounts, and the law on your side." I signed the papers. Each stroke of the pen felt like closing a chapter. Decades of enabling sealed behind ink and legality. Margaret gathered the documents, her voice firm. "You've made the right decision. Your family's safety and security come first. The rest is noise." When Jessica and I stepped back into the sunlight outside the office, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the next call, the next demand, the next guilt-laced plea. I had taken the weapon out of her hands and placed it firmly in mine. The letter reached her before I even had to say a word. 2 days after signing with Margaret, the lawyer, I knew Samantha had opened the envelope. I didn't need confirmation. I felt it in the air, like a storm gathering, electric, restless. At 6:30 that evening, the phone rang. Jessica's hand hovered above it, trembling. "Don't," she whispered. But I did. Samantha's voice tore through the receiver, sharp and frantic. "What the hell is this, Dad?" I didn't flinch. "You read it. Don't play dumb with me," she shrieked. "You cut me out of the will? You're giving everything to Emma and Jake through some trust fund. You can't do this to me." I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me. Jessica sat across from me at the kitchen table, eyes wide, tears shimmering. "I didn't do it to you," I said calmly. "I did it for them, so they don't grow up learning your kind of desperation." Her voice cracked with rage. "You're pathetic. You think this makes you strong? Cutting your own daughter out of her inheritance? What kind of father does that? I let the words sink. Years ago, they would have gutted me. Tonight, they didn't touch me. The kind, I said quietly, who refuses to bankroll a thief. The line went silent. I could hear her breathing, ragged, shallow, on the other end. Finally, she exploded. That watch wasn't theft. It was mine by right. Everything you own should be mine by right. You're old, Dad. You're wasting away while we're fighting to survive. What good is your money rotting with you in that house? Jessica gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. I spoke slowly, every word deliberate. Do you hear yourself? You don't want to remember me. You want to replace me. You don't see me as a father. You see me as a wallet. Damn right, she snapped before she realized what she'd said. There was a pause, as if she'd shocked even herself. Then she backpedaled, her voice lowering into the tone she'd used all her life to twist the knife. Dad, I didn't mean that. You know I love you. I'm scared. I need your help. But that voice no longer worked on me. You don't love me, Samantha. You love what I can give you. And that ends now. The calmness in my tone seemed to rattle her more than any shouting could. You think you're clever, she hissed. You think cutting me out fixes anything? Fine. You keep your money. You keep your precious watch. But don't come crawling to me when you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you. You'll die alone, Dad. Alone and miserable. I didn't let her finish. Better alone, I said, than surrounded by people who see me as a paycheck. Her scream rattled the line before she slammed the phone down. The abrupt silence that followed was almost peaceful. Jessica's tears finally spilled, sliding down her cheeks as she whispered, William, she hates you. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine, squeezing gently. No, I said. She hates the fact that I stopped letting her hate me quietly. I've taken away her weapon. That's all this is. Jessica nodded slowly, though her eyes still shimmered with sorrow. I leaned back, staring out the window into the darkened yard, where the garden lights flickered softly against the night. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of what would come next, because Samantha no longer held the power to decide it. It happened 3 nights later. Jessica and I were just finishing dinner. Roast chicken and potatoes, her favorite comfort meal. The clink of forks against plates was soft, ordinary, almost peaceful. Then the pounding started. Not a knock, not a doorbell. Pounding. Fists hammering against wood so hard the frames rattled on the walls. Jessica froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Oh no. I rose slowly, wiping my hands on the napkin, my stomach calm. I'd been expecting this. The pounding grew louder, faster. A voice split the night. Dad, open this damn door. You can't do this to me. Samantha. I walked to the hallway, Jessica trailing nervously behind. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see her shadow, wild, frantic, pacing. Peter's voice cut through next, low and venomous. Old man, you think you can just cut us out? We'll see about that. Jessica gripped my arm. William, don't. But I was already unlocking the door. When I opened it, the sight was almost pitiful. Samantha stood there, hair tangled, mascara smeared, eyes wild with desperation. Peter hovered behind her, his smirk brittle now, more mask than menace. She shoved past me without waiting. You can't do this. You can't just erase me from your life like I'm nothing. I'm your daughter. I shut the door calmly behind Peter, then turned to face her. My voice was steady. You erased yourself the moment you put a price tag on our family. Her eyes flashed, wet with fury. Stop with the riddles. I want my money. I want my inheritance. I deserve it." I didn't move. "You deserve nothing you haven't earned. And you've earned exactly this." She stepped closer, jabbing her finger in my chest. "You think you can cut me out and still keep Emma and Jake? I'll tell them everything. I'll poison them against you. They'll hate you as much as I do." Jessica gasped softly, tears brimming in her eyes. But I only leaned forward, my voice dropping low. "Do that. And one day, when they're old enough to know the truth, they'll realize exactly who took their future away. And it won't be me." Peter finally spoke, stepping forward, his voice dark. "You think you're untouchable, Will? You think hiding behind some lawyer makes you safe? You don't scare me." I held his gaze without flinching. Then I reached to the side table by the door and picked up a folder I'd left there earlier. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it. Inside were the documents Margaret had prepared, the updated will, the trust paperwork, and on top, the restraining order, already signed by the judge that morning. I handed it to Peter. "Read it." He frowned, flipping the first page. His smirk faltered. Samantha snatched it from his hand, scanning it quickly. Her face paled. "What? What is this?" "Protection," I said simply. "The watch was the last straw. The police have the report. The judge has the evidence. If either of you set foot on this property again without permission, you'll be arrested. This time, it won't be me cutting you off. It'll be the law." The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha's hands trembled as she crumpled the paper. "You wouldn't—" "I already did," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed, her fury dissolving into disbelief. For the first time, she looked small, powerless. Peter muttered a curse under his breath, tossing the papers onto the floor. "This isn't over." I stepped closer, my voice like iron. "Yes, Peter, it is." Samantha's tears spilled, streaking her cheeks. "Dad, please." Her voice cracked. But it wasn't the voice of my little girl. It was the voice of a woman who had burned every bridge, only now realizing she stood on an island with no way back. I shook my head slowly. "I loved you enough to give you everything, and you loved me enough to take it all without thanks. But love isn't enough anymore. Respect is, and you've lost that forever." Jessica moved beside me, her hand finding mine. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "You need to leave, Samantha." Samantha's face crumpled, her mouth opening to protest. But Peter tugged her arm sharply. "Come on, it's done." For once she didn't resist. They turned, stepping back into the night. The door closed behind them, the click echoing like the final nail in a coffin. Jessica leaned against me, her tears hot against my shoulder. "William, is it really over?" I looked down at her, then at the quiet house around us. The walls that had witnessed betrayal, the floor that had felt the weight of anger, the air that had carried decades of manipulation. And for the first time in my life, I could say the words with certainty. "Yes," I whispered, "it's over." The house has been quiet since that night, but this time the silence is peace, not absence. The watch sits back on my wrist, its steady ticking a reminder that time is too precious to waste on those who see you as nothing more than a bank account. I polish it every morning now, not out of vanity, but out of respect, for my father, for myself, for the life I refuse to let them steal. Samantha hasn't called. Peter hasn't shown up. And thanks to the restraining order, I know if they ever try again, the law will answer before I have to. Instead, I hear from Emma and Jake. Their little voices on the phone asking about school, telling me about their drawings, their laughter filling the silence in ways money never could. In the end, I didn't just protect my watch. I protected my dignity, my peace, and my future. Because some things are worth more than gold. Some things, like respect, can't be pawned. If you've ever had to stand up to family who saw you only for what you could give, tell me your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like this, because you never know whose life it might change.